Good evening, everyone. We're happy you could join us tonight. My name is Marlene Tillman. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of the Gwinnett Parent Coalition to Dismantle the School to Prison Pipeline, or Gwinnett Stop for short. And we're a grassroots parent and youth organizing group that works to dismantle the school to prison pipeline in Gwinnett County. And for those who don't know, the school to prison pipeline is a national trend, whereas children are funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. It primarily impacts students of color, students with disabilities, students from low wealth backgrounds, and males. And if you hit every one of those categories, you are at the highest risk of being in the school to prison pipeline. We accomplish our work at the local, state, and national levels. Our work falls into two buckets: public education and policy change and advocacy, pushing for and against policies that impact the school to prison pipeline. And in our public education bucket, we run a parent leadership institute, a youth leadership institute, as well as run standalone workshops to educate the public. The workshops include understanding the student code of conduct, learning about interventions available if your student is facing challenges, workshops designed to help parents and community members understand the feeders into the school to prison pipeline, and more importantly, how to change it. And we also offer training around the Every Student Succeeds Act to empower parents to leverage the family engagement components in it. Under our policy bucket, a couple of wins that we've had around police and schools are the elimination of the contact quota for school resource officers, and we were successful in reducing the number of disciplinary infractions that could garner a police interaction by 33%. And we are a volunteer-based organization. We cannot do our work without help. And so some opportunities. We host a monthly community meeting on the second Monday of each month, which this is. We'd love for you to sign and share our petition to kick cops out of school. And I'll post the link in the comments. We are also collecting feedback for changing the student code of conduct, and I'll post that link as well. In late August, early September, we'll host 2 online trainings about ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and you. And of course, it will need to have a COVID flavor now, won't it? Coming up in September, on September 14th, in conjunction with the League of Women Voters, we will co-host a school board candidate forum for districts 1 and 3. And don't forget, and in October, we will be partaking in the Dignity in Schools campaign National Week of Action in October. So those are some things. I'll also post a link for where you can get in touch with us, and please, please, please volunteer to help us in supporting our work. So next up, we have our first installment of a monthly education series that will run through November, and I'm so excited about this. Oftentimes there are things going on and we don't understand why. And Melody, who is an advocate with Gwinnett Stop, is here to help us understand why. And she will give us an introduction into education inequality and how the US education system got to where it is today. And I'm really, really looking forward to this. It's really exciting. Melody's going to bring us a lot of good information that we will be using going forward. Thank you, Melody.
Thanks, Marlene. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is a very important presentation that we're putting together to help explain how we got to this moment where there's inequality, a teacher exodus crisis, and now we're going back to school during a pandemic with no plans to protect the students and staff. So I'm going to go ahead and go into a little bit of the history and why this education system that's been in a crisis since the beginning is failing our students. So education system in crisis, a system that preserves inequality in the United States. So the first thing that we have to be clear on is that the education system is not broken. Often you'll hear when people talk about the education system or even the criminal justice system, they'll say the system is broken. The system needs to be fixed. When was the system not broken? So the sad truth is that the education system in the United States from the beginning was very discriminatory. And it was bent on preserving white supremacy, on the class divide, on numerous inequalities. The definition of broken is having been fractured or damaged, no longer in one piece or in working order. So at Gwinnett Stop, we know that the education system in the US was never in one piece. We know that the current system functions off of inequality and that it was never working. At the outset, there were Native American boarding schools that were kidnapping Native children from their communities and forcing them into assimilation. There were underfunded Black schools that were used to just provide a workforce, just to provide labor. We have the Americanization programs for Mexican students. That's where immigrant children were also forced to assimilate. They were not being given equal opportunities or education. There was also the exclusion of students with disabilities, and there was gender discrimination and no protections for LGBTQ students. And sadly, that's still the case. Native boarding schools. So the purpose of the Native boarding schools was to, quote, to kill the Indian and save the man. This was a part of the ethnic cleansing efforts on behalf of the United States government. This was when they were trying to take more and more land from indigenous peoples. And it got to the point where they wanted to try a different tactic to remove Native Americans from their land. The Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Hiram Price, stated that it was cheaper to give the natives education than to fight them. So this was part of a psychological warfare on Native communities, on indigenous peoples to plunder, to take their land, to strip the children of their names, languages, customs, spiritual practices. Also, during this time, Native children were dying at the schools because of the different diseases from settlers. And so the children were being buried on school grounds. A very horrible time in this nation's history, and the treatment of underfunding Native schools and assimilation and not including Native people in the teaching profession and in the academics in higher ed is something that continues to whitewash their history. Americanization programs for Mexican students. I highly suggest this article called Tougher Times for Latino Students. History says they've never had it easy. It's an NPR higher ed article by Claudio Sanchez. In this article, she states that assimilation and cultural erasure was the purpose of the Americanization programs for Mexican students. It was a non-academic curriculum that focused on industrial and domestic training. A school board member in El Modena, California, stated, "If we educate the Mexicans better, who will pick our crops?" I think this goes to why I titled this presentation, "The Education System That Preserves Inequality in the US." Because the underfunding of programs and the assimilation curriculums is an intentional effort to give non-white children inferior education and to preserve the status quo. So in these schools were also segregated. They taught American values, hygiene because they believe that immigrant children were dirty. A lot of stigmas were perpetuated through the curriculum, and they taught that to the children, which instilled a sense of a self-hate that a lot of children of color have to deal with when they go to predominantly white schools. Students with disabilities. So it's important to know that students with disabilities were completely not allowed to get education for a significant part of the US education system. There were, if only wealthy children with disabilities were allowed to get an education through tutors or other people who were hired. But if you were poor or if you were not wealthy, you just did not receive an education. It wasn't until the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504, that there was the first disability civil rights law that prohibited discrimination based on ability for programs that receive federal funding. This picture that you see is one of the picture taken on the day of the passage of the Americans with Disability Act. Title II of that act requires accessible education for all students, regardless of ability. The Individuals with Disability Education Act, which was formerly known as the Education Act for All Handicapped Children, which was passed in 1975, guarantees a free and appropriate education. A free and appropriate education means that every child with disabilities who qualifies under the IDEA Act deserves to have education that's appropriate so that they can learn. So they should have the staff and the equipment and the facility that they need so that they can learn adequately. We still have a lot of segregation when it comes to special education classes and general education classes. The public school system and all school systems in the US need to do better with integrating students with disabilities and creating a school culture that values all students equally. Gender discrimination and no LGBTQ protections. This is a picture of Patsy Mink. She was the first woman of color elected to Congress. She was a Japanese American who represented Hawaii and was instrumental in building support for Title IX. Title IX, which was passed in 1972, was a federal law that protected women and girls from discrimination in schools and colleges, especially when it came to school-sponsored sports. It wasn't until the Women's Education Act, which provided grants for equal opportunities in education. So think about programs to get girls into science. That's when we started to see even more efforts to make sure that education programs were equal for boys and girls. And just to talk about the anti-bullying laws, when it comes to LGBTQ protections, there's still a serious lack of legislation that specifically mentions LGBTQ students, especially trans students. And so we have a long way to go. And but there are 14th Amendment protections. Equal protection still applies. There's a First Amendment right to self-expression. And some states do have anti-bullying laws, which specifically mention LGBTQ students. Unfortunately, these laws are not in all 50 states and they're poorly enforced. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. Black schools. So before integration, Black schools Black students were in cramped buildings with no running water, no electricities, no cafeterias, while the neighboring white schools had all of that plus more. Black people were supporting the community by paying taxes and performing essential work to keep the city running, but their children were not receiving equal education opportunities. It's important to know that Brown v. Board was a strategy to get funding for Black students. It wasn't so much wanting Black kids and white kids to sit together and learn. It was about making sure that Black children received adequate resources. And since white schools were receiving them and Black schools weren't, it was a strategy to put both students in the same schoolhouse so that they will all have the same opportunities. Unfortunately, we see that didn't happen, that there's still segregation, a lot of segregation now. And the facilities, they're underfunded schools that don't have all the materials, that have a shortage of teachers. So we're still seeing some of the similar problems decades after the Brown v. Board decision. There was an intentional underfunding to maintain the racial caste because it was a belief that Black students were never going to be anything, that they were going to stay as second-class citizens. So Brown v. Board was an effort to remedy that, but we see that we still are still dealing with the similar problems with underfunding schools in low-income Black and Latinx neighborhoods. Dr. Martin Luther King said that I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know we will win, but I've come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. Unfortunately, King was right. We are in the burning house. White supremacy still continues. Everything that I've said about Black schools, Americanization programs for Mexican students, which also heavily emphasize learning the English language and no other language. You're talking about Native schools, all those issues that I presented on those slides are still the vestiges of those original sins still linger. We still underfund English language learner classes. We still have issues with underfunding Native schools and having Native teachers. We still underfund Black schools. So the integration has not been the solution that we thought it was going to be. The curriculum is still influenced by the Confederacy here in 2020. The textbook commissions, where you had a lot of conservative people, you had the United Daughters of the Confederacy, you had a lot of more right-wing religious people influencing what the children would be learning in schools. We had a lot of revisionist history make it into our schools, in literature that was very Eurocentric and made Black children think that the only history that mattered when it came to us was slavery, and the version of slavery that we were told was whitewashed as well. Also, the school to prison pipeline, that's what Gwinnett Stop focuses on. So you have students who are dropping out of high school. You have students who are being arrested. You have Black students, especially Black students with disabilities, being disproportionately impacted with police contact, arrests, suspensions, expulsions. This is the school to prison pipeline. And we also have college that's made for wealthy white children. So even low income minorities who make it to college struggle once they get there because they were not fully equipped for college. They didn't have all the tutors, the SAT tutors, and the extensive prep courses that wealthy families are able to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars for. So we still have an education system that only functions for the few. And this picture is a picture of an officer from the Richland County Sheriff's Department in South Carolina. This is a picture of him slamming a girl on the ground. After this picture, he will, after what you see in the picture, he continues to drag the student across the classroom because she refused to go to the disciplinary office. So this is why we need counselors, not cops. We need people who understand that when you're working with children, that you treat them differently, that you de-escalate, and that you don't traumatize them. Imagine being this student and trying to go to school the next day or the next week after you have been body slammed by a grown man. The next slide is talking about the current crisis. So we have an unraveling of the education system. Our system is so dysfunctional that we're truly having we're having multiple crises come together and just undo the education system. According to ULEAD, the Utah Learning Through Effective, Actionable, and Dynamic Education, 4 in 10 teachers leave the profession in the first 5 years. So we have a mass exodus of teachers because we have underfunded schools, because we have not given the teachers all the resources and supports and administrative support that they need. It's getting harder and harder for them to do their job with less and less money and resources. So teachers are leaving. The teacher profession was once one where you got in, you loved it, and you retired. But teachers are staying for shorter and shorter amounts of time. The schools are overcrowded. There's a lot of paperwork that the teachers have to deal with. There's ineffective discipline, as Gwinnett Stop highlights, and there are long hours on at night and on the weekends. The system also continues to fail marginalized students. The current system upholds the racial caste where low-income Black and Brown students receive substandard education and resources, while their families also combat systemic racism in policing, housing, and employment. When was this not the norm? We're also defunding education. It's not just underfunding certain schools. Overall, there are slashes to education, which you'll see in this graphic from the National Education Association. There's more students, there's increased enrollment, but there's less money being allocated to education. And that shows our priorities. So for Gwinnett County specifically, Gwinnett Stop focuses on Gwinnett County. We see that Black students are overrepresented in discipline and underrepresented in academic opportunities. So Black students are expelled, suspended in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and we're overrepresented in those statistics. But Black and Latinx students are underrepresented in AP, gifted, all of the different things that gives free college credit or other opportunities. We don't see non-white students represented in those areas proportionally. There's also a severe lack of adequate language supports. So Gwinnett County is one of the most diverse counties in the Southeast. Over 100 languages are spoken in Gwinnett County. This should be a cause of celebration. We should capitalize off of this, but unfortunately that's not the case. And we don't even have students who are learning in their language. So they're basically not getting an education. So we think that we should defund the SRO budget and make sure that money goes to counselors, full-time counselors in every school, more of them, and not just a few counselors per hundreds and hundreds of children, especially like you see in high schools. And we also think that the Gwinnett County Public Schools should adequately fund special education programs and language support. There's also a culture of racism and sexual assault. At Beaver Ridge Elementary School, which is in Gwinnett County, a teacher assigned slavery-themed math questions, including a question that asks, if Frederick Douglass got 2 beatings per day, how many beatings did he get in 1 week? This was an actual question that children had to sit and think about. In Archer High School, students wanted to protest recent racist incidents by wearing all Black to school. The principal or the administration threatened to suspend students who wanted to participate in this anti-racist protest by wearing all Black. The Gwinnett Stop had to get the ACLU involved. There have also been racist posts from students from Parkview and Brickwood on social media, them saying racial slurs. Also, a yearbook photo at Collins Hill High School in Gwinnett depicted a student who photoshopped a picture of Dr. King holding a document with the N-word on it twice. And this made it into the yearbook, and it was printed and distributed to all of the students. There's also a petition from teachers and students calling for the Gwinnett County public school system to end systemic racism. And they have many suggestions like changing the curriculum and having and changing the culture of the school system. There is also a culture of sexual assault at Gwinnett County Public Schools. The former swim coach at Meadow Creek High School was arrested for 2 counts of sexual battery of a minor. Several students came forward, and Meadow Creek High School alumni are currently organizing for justice for the victims and advocating for systemic change. A culture where students are safe and there's a robust accountability process put in place. We stand in solidarity with the students organizing around this, and we demand that GCPS hire more full-time counselors. This is not the only incident or incidents of sexual assault that have happened in Gwinnett County Public Schools. In 2008, the band teacher at South Gwinnett High School was arrested on charges of sexual assault. There was also a lawsuit filed claiming that the school was aware and did nothing to address the issue. The culture of racism and sexual assault at GCPS requires system-wide solutions. So we cannot continue to deal with we cannot continue to view the issues of sexual assault against students and racist incidents as isolated. They're not isolated. It's a systemic problem, and it requires a systemic solution. Unfortunately, many school systems across the country, including Gwinnett County Public Schools, are going back to school in a pandemic. This was unfortunate to hear the news that there was no serious plan. Gwinnett County prides itself on being different, being set apart, doing things better, having a culture of excellence, but we're seeing that they're sending children back to school just like many other districts without a real plan. The only thing that they've done was they delayed the start of school by 1 week to August 12th, and they're calling for mandatory masks. That is not feasible if you know children. Children are not going to wear masks. I envision children, taking the mask off, flinging them around the classroom. I mean, these are children. We've seen how adults are refusing to wear masks in public, at grocery stores, even angrily confronting people who ask them to wear masks. So I think the school board needs to come up with a much better plan and needs to find out a way to protect the students and the staff. We also know that this will disproportionately impact Black, Latinx, and Native students across the country and in Gwinnett County. The students who cannot stay home with parents, the students whose parents are essential workers and are on the front lines, this is going to be a majority Black and Latinx families. And so something has to be done to prevent even more injustices happening on top of an education system that was already in crisis before the pandemic. But even given all of this news, and I know it's a lot of unfortunate information, we do have hope because we have protesters and advocates. We have legal aid is supporting us and helping us write letters and request information. And Gwinnett Stop is organizing in the community as well. So we know that we will win eventually. We just have to keep pushing until we get there. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this presentation. I believe we're going to be taking some questions as well. And I hope that wherever you are, that you're able to contribute and do whatever you can, whether it's signing the petition, getting involved with Gwinnett Stop by attending a meeting, or going to the Gwinnett County School Board meetings to voice your opinions.
Thank you, Melody. Wow, that was a lot.
It was a lot, wasn't it?
It was a lot. I really, really appreciate the great historic, the historic overview that you provided for us tonight. There's so much to unpack when you really think about just the Native American children and the things that they were subjected to, and the Mexican Americans. And we come full circle to today, and we have children in cages. And
Yes,
then we say, this is not this country.
it is.
Country has a history, unfortunately, and we're looking to change that history. We're looking to have a point of reconciliation from here, and to go on, to go forward. We need to have that reconciliation to be able to go forward. And so this was a great point, and we see this education series is really starting to understand what that history is, and how we change this trajectory, right? But we can't change it if we don't know what it is. If we don't name the thing, we cannot change racism by scooting around it and calling it all sorts of other things. And yes, for those who like the titling of implicit bias, yes, implicit bias does exist. However, it is not the foundation of what this country was built on. It is not what this country continues to do. And so, ironically enough, I saw a documentary last night about the highway system, and it was so funny to see it told in such isolation about they didn't really want to go into the cities because that would just mean tearing down neighborhoods. But then they showed pictures of them tearing down the neighborhoods. And ironically enough, in the major cities, you will see that highways went through Black communities. They totally dissected it. They tore down sections and they ran the highway through. And so you can find, it used to be the railroad tracks. On the other side of the railroad tracks was a familiar saying. Now it's follow the highway. When you get into the inner city, you will see that the highway is going to dissect a community of color, and it's still true today. So when you think about things like that, and what we're built on, what that foundation looks like, education's no different. And so in order to change that, we have to call the thing. And I really appreciate you for getting us started on that. As I said, this will run through November. We will look at different sections of education. This was to give you at least a base level of understanding. Going forward, we will be diving in depth into the topics that Melody raised. I checked the comment sections. We don't have any questions in there. There was a comment about, ooh, special education isn't special. So it is the special sometimes that you don't want. And again, that was something that we fight for, to get, even at the basic level, when you think we just want to educate kids to reach their full potential. I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yes.
So we're going to close out here, unless you have any further comments, Melody.
Oh, yes, I was just going to say, you mentioned special education, and what's so frustrating about all of this, the lack of funding, the lack of support for different students, is that the education is supposed to be the great equalizer. This is supposed to be, it doesn't matter where you're from or who your parents are or what your background is. When you come into the classroom, anything is possible. And we see that that the way that the states and the local districts have prioritized some students over others, we've seen that this country has not lived up to that ideal.
Absolutely. And that's what it was designed to do. back from the Poor People's Campaign. That's what education was supposed to be, the great equalizer. I think about even today, my both of my sons are graduates of Gwinnett County Public Schools, and they were both in AP or AP and gifted, and the 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 fact that they were frequently the only Black males in those classes, and one was a math and science, on a math and science track. And so I think one year he was in the class with the other Black male who was on that track. But you can imagine how that feels when everybody around you does not look like you, and so who become your models in school. And so, then it tends to take on a different life within that building, because now it's a smaller community, and Black children are looked at a certain way, brown children are looked at a certain way. Students with disabilities are under the table. The only thing that they don't understand is students with disabilities are just as capable. Some of them are in those gifted and AP classes,
Right.
and some of them require more supports than other to be there. But why wouldn't you do that? Just why wouldn't you do that?
And you think about all the potential that a child has so young in their life, and we have to do more. We have to do better to make sure that every child can reach their full potential, and instead of just having a small group of students, just think about how much better this society could be, how much more vibrant the accomplishments and the advances that we could have if we truly properly educated every child. We're really truly, that child is suffering a loss, and the community is as well, when we don't give them the supports they deserve.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is one of the things that keeps me involved in the work, is that I understand, yes, my children have graduated. They have long graduated. Thankfully, they've gone on to be successful. But it didn't have to be that way, first of all. It took a lot of advocacy on my part. And what I understand is, um, I am impacted by all the children in the community.
Mhm.
If they fail, my community fails, and I live here.
Mhm.
So, what does that look like for my quality of life? And I think we have to get beyond ourselves and
Yes.
start to understand the more of the village concept. I know, the American exceptionalism is built on individualism, but
And see, and
perhaps it's time to step back, which is why we are where we are with the pandemic.
exactly. I was
Everybody,
just about to say that. That's why we're having problems now, because of individualism. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And so we need to take on more of that village mentality, which people of color are rooted in, right? And so you pick any folks of color, and there's that whole village mentality. We move together as a family. We move together as a community, and it definitely is the way to go. As the African proverb goes, if you wanna go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we need to do more of the going far and
Yeah.
going together.
Yes.
We really have to start to do that. So this is the point. We're in a moment in time, and I think it's time to really force the reconciliation, and then force that next step of being restored,
Yes.
because we won't get to it until we have the first one. And
Yes.
so I think right now the country's having a reconciliation. I think it's important for this organization to force that reconciliation within the education system, because the future is the children, and they do need to be educated to their full potential. And they really need to be active, engaged members within their communities. And I don't want to turn out angry children. I want to be angry adults in my community. Um, and it's just important for us to really think about that. and take on more of that village and start that reconciliation process within the education system. Start teaching our children the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And so they have to have the full story. They can't have a section of the story that we like. They need the full story. And I think that helps everyone to move on from a different point.
I agree. Great
Yeah.
insights as usual. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to end it here. I want to thank folks for joining in. Um, and so someone asked, does the education system not need reform as the criminal justice system? Yes. And actually, it needs a rebuilding. It's my 2 cents. I'll let you weigh in on that, Melody.
I think I'm not sure if the question also is at the beginning of the presentation. I said that we're talking about fixing, a broken system, and it, but the system was never a whole. The system was never not broken, and so I think that. I don't think reform is going to do it. I do think that we have to build it anew, because the foundation of it, the foundation of it is so flawed, and there's so much inequality, but by race and income, it needs to be, the systems need to be redone completely, um, and we're seeing this. The pandemic is really putting a mirror to all the existing inequities, like the digital divide, for example. There's a lot of kids who have been going to school without having internet access at home, without having laptops and devices at home. But now that was their only way to have an education during the shutdown, they were completely left without. So it exacerbated it, but there was still a crack already there in the first place. So I do think that we have to start anew, and that just the testing, the lack of funding, the discrimination, the way that we treat teachers, and all of it has to go if we're going to have a working system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to agree with that because it's working by design.
Yeah.
However, it's not the design we want.
Yeah, we need a new design
We need
completely.
a new design. For sure, for sure. Here's the new designs, right?
Yes, here's the new.
Um, so please, 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 come engage with us. This will be going on monthly, second Monday of every month at 7 p.m. We'll run this through November. If you have an area you'd like us to go deep in, by all means, shoot us a comment, direct message us, email, text, whatever it is. We're happy to look into it. Sign our petition to kick cops out of school. And I posted some other links in the comment section for you all to please go and give us feedback on the student code of conduct. We are pushing that as well as the upcoming September 14th um, school board candidate. How many people know that it's over a $2 billion with a B dollar budget that our school board manages? So we need to be very engaged with that. And we'll soon be unpacking it. So if you are a numbers person, please join us. We would love some help on unpacking budgets and things like that, cracking the code, so to speak, of the funding formulas. But that is all for us tonight. I want to thank you again for joining us, and you all stay healthy and wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Let me say that again. Wear a mask and social distance.
Yeah.
Please. The village is counting on it. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.
Have a good night.